Welcome to chapter 9 of the Book of Esther. The last chapter in 8, we had the results of Haman being put to death, that Esther went in and appealed to the king that he would return the letters, bring the letters back that were sent out, but that was not possible under Persian law. So therefore, Artaxerxes gave Esther permission to write whatever she would write in the new law to supersede the old one, and she wrote a letter for allowing the Jews to defend themselves. And the result of that is here in chapter 9. We'll find out what it is. And it begins, for in the dodecato, again, duo, deca, 12th mini, we have menopause comes from that month. On the 13th of the Minos, and this is another spelling of the same word, 3376, depends on if it's a subject or an object or an indirect object and so forth. And we do have a new study guide which you can download free, which goes through the grammar of the Greek Apostolic Bible Polyglot using the analytical lexicon. Highly recommend it. And so in the 12th month, and it says this is Adar, Adar, or Hadar, however it's pronounced. The grammata, the letters, grammar comes from that. The letters written by the king were at hand. So they all went out by these couriers and took the letters throughout the kingdom from the Ethiopia unto India. And in that day, the adversaries of the Iudaeis, the Jews, were destroyed, for no one opposed, fearing them. For the rulers of the satrapon, the satraps, we mentioned in the last chapter, you can add that to your English derivatives book, direct transliteration of these satraps, are like a state or a province, and the sovereigns and the royal scribes esteemed the Jews, for the fear of Mordecai rested upon them. And of course, Mordecai was a Jew, and the second in command, and as in other times, that a Jewish person has been a second in command. Like I mentioned before, Disraeli was the prime minister of England, I think during Victoria's reign, and I'm sure there are other ones. And it says, because for the order of the king became for him to be named, that is, to be famous. There's the dagger here. For him to be famous or named in all the kingdom. Now here we got chapter 5, and there's nothing there except that dagger, and it is not in the Complutensian or the 16 for some reason, and basically in the King James it has, thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. But that is not in the Greek. And I'm not sure if it's probably in the Hebrew, because this is where the King James took the Old Testament text from. But I didn't check that out, so you could check it out if you have a Hebrew Old Testament. And in Susa, the city, Poli, the Jews killed 500 andras, men, andra. We have an android, comes from that word. 500 men, that's just in the one city where the king was, and it says both Farsanatha and Thelphone and Asphatha and Foradatha and Adalia and Arithatha and Pharmastha and Arisai and Aridai and Vaizatha, even the 10 sons of Haman, Amadathu, son of Hamadatha, the Bugian. Now, I believe he's talking about Haman being a Bugayan, whatever a Bugayan was. But other places said he was from Macedonia, I would imagine. But anyway, the 10 sons were killed. The Haman, the enemy of the Jew. But they plundered not in that day. So the Jews didn't take any of the belongings of the people that they killed. They just left them there, I suppose, for anybody to take them, and showing that they were not doing it for money. They were doing it for righteousness because of these people hating the chosen of God. And the number was given to the king, the Vasili, of the ones being destroyed in Susa. Now, you'd think he would be very angry being a Persian and these Persians being killed by foreigners, Jews. But it says, and the king said to Esther, the Jews destroyed in Susa 500 men in the city. And in the place round about, how do you imagine they were treated? What then do you still petition? For it will be yours. So instead of being angry, he must have really loved Esther, and he gave her free rein to do what she wanted to do. And Esther said to the Vasili, the king, well, let it be given to the Jews to deal likewise the morrow. I had tomorrow, but I like it, the morrow. To me is better. We don't usually use this in modern English, but this isn't modern English, and the morrow, because it has the article here, teen, and avrion, the morrow, where tomorrow, I guess, comes from that. So as for the 10 sons of Haman to hang. So deca, 10, decade, 10 years. And the king committed so to be. And he displayed to the Jews of the city the bodies, the somata, somatic, has to do with the body, the sons of Haman to kremase, to hang. They were going to be hung upon the xilu, the tree, and then later a timber after it's cut down. Now I looked up, because I said I would, the last of that word, because I forgot to do it before when we talked about Haman hanging, kremase, from the xilu. And now his sons are also hung on the xilu. In Luke 23:29, it says, in one of the hanging, the kremase, same word, evildoers blasphemed him, saying, if you are the Christ, save yourself and us. So therefore you see that this word hang is the exact same thing that is used for Jesus. He was hung on the xilu, same as Haman. And then in Acts 5:30, it says, Peter says, the God of our fathers raised Jesus, whom you laid hands upon, having hanged upon a xilu, upon a tree. That's Acts 5:30, exactly the same as what happened to Haman, hanging him on the xilu. Then in Acts 10:39, it says, and we are witnesses of all which he did both in the region of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they did away with by hanging upon a timber, xilu. And then Galatians 3:13, it says, Christ brought us back from out of the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it has been written, accursed is every one hanging upon a xilu, in Galatians 3:13. So accursed is anyone hanging upon a xilu. They're like murderers, and they're getting what they deserve, and they're accursed. And Jesus, of course, was innocent, but he paid the price for us. And Haman's sons also were hang. So it doesn't necessarily mean a noose put around the neck and strangled or dropped and their neck broken. Just wanted to point that all out. And the Jews gathered together in Susis on the 14th day of Adar, or Adar in Greek, and they killed 300 men. Andros again, but they plundered nothing. Again, they killed them, but they didn't take anything. And the rest of the Jews in the kingdom gathered together and helped themselves and gained rest from the warlike men, the ones that were attacking them. For they destroyed of them 10,000 and 5,000 men on the 13th of Adar, and they plundered nothing. So myria is 10,000. Myriadis is in the plural, so 10,000s, and 7, so that, what is that, 70,000 and 5,000, 75,000 men the Jews killed in the Persian Empire on the 13th of Adar. But they didn't plunder their goods, probably left it laying there for anybody to take. And they rested on the 14th of the same month, and this would be the Jews, and celebrated it as a day of rest with joy and gladness. They were not killed like they all thought they would be by Haman's edict. And the Jews in Susa, the city, that's where Artaxerxes and Esther and Mordecai were, gathered together also on the 14th and rested. But they celebrated even on the 15th with joy and gladness. Because of this, then, the Jews, being disseminated in every place outside, celebrate on the 14th of Adar a good day with gladness, each sending portions to the neighbor. And Mordecai wrote these words in a scroll, which is probably this one, and sent them to the Jews. So Mordecai writes information, and they were sent out. As many as were in the kingdom of Artaxerxes, near and far, and like we mentioned, from Ethiopia to India, to establish these days as good days and to celebrate both the 14th and the 15th of Adar. And then we find out what it's called. For in these days the Jews gained rest from their enemies, and the month in which things turned for them, when instead of being destroyed to these days, which was Adar, from mourning, mourning, that is in sadness, not mourning, but mourning and sadness, to joy, and from grief to good days, as we mentioned in the last chapter, how God changes things overnight, and was to celebrate entirely for good days of wedding feasts and gladness, sending gift portions to their friends and to the poor. So, good time to get married, being happy, and they sent gifts to people and to the poor. As I'm reading this is on the day of Hanukkah, and that's not the same as Purim, but it's interesting that today is Hanukkah of 2018. And the Jews favorably received it as Mordecai wrote to them of how Haman, the son of Hamadatha, here it is, the Macedon, again the Macedonian, waged war against them, as he ordained a referendum. Psiphisma is a referendum, some type of voting and the lot. So they, however they cast lots, it called it a referendum because they're counting them up to find out which way the lots went. And they were cast to obliterate the Jews, them. Now, a reason I highlighted this in red is if you go back into the New Testament, in Romans, the end of the last verse of chapter 13, it talks about with he who has wisdom, let him, it's not vote, it's not count the number of the beast, but it's siphizo, to vote, a referendum, the vote, the number of the beast, and the number is 666. I'm sorry, it's not 666. 600, comma, 60, comma, 6. Three separate Greek letters, all meaning something different. So here is other place where it shows that the referendum and the lot, the casting of these lots and then the counting of them to find out who's going to be obliterated. And how he entered to the king, telling him to hang Mordecai. So this is all about what Haman was doing. But as much as Haman attempted to bring bad things upon the Jews, upon himself, it came to pass. And he was hanged, there it is again, he and his children. And on account of this, they call these days Purim in Greek. We have Purim, that's how it is in English today. I'm not sure in Israel, Purim, I think. But anyway, it's Purim in the Greek, and it's almost a transliteration, so you can add that to your English derivatives book. They call these days Purim because the klerus, the lots. I should have highlighted klerus because we have a cleric comes from that, because clerics were chosen by lots, beginning with Matthias, when the disciples cast lots to find out who would replace Judas Iscariot. Because then it says in parentheses, for in their dialecto, which is a dialect, a transliteration there into English, they are called Purim, because of the words of this epistolis, a letter to be read out loud. That's what an epistle was, not a letter for somebody to read by himself. As much as they suffered on account of it, and as much as happened to them and was stopped. So this was all written by Mordecai and sent out to the Jews. And the Jews favorably received it unto themselves, and unto their seed, and unto the ones purposed unto them to observe it. That is still observed today. Nor in fact shall they treat it otherwise. And in these days, a memorial was being completed according to Genion, generation, and you can see where that's a transliteration, the Genion and generation, and city, and patron, paternal from that, and place. And these days were celebrated for all chronon, time, and we have chronology, and their memorial in no way should fail unto generations. And Esther, the Vasilisi queen, a daughter of Avihail, wrote, and Mordecaios the Jew, as much as they did also the confirmation of the letter of the Purim. And Mordecai and Esther the queen established to themselves for them, and then establishing according to their fasting and of their counsel. And Esther established the matter into the eon, and it was written for a memorial. Now, I'm not exactly why the fasting, because it sounded like it was all celebrating, but apparently there was some fasting is mentioned here. I'm not exactly sure how that relates to Purim, but maybe I'll find out and let you know in the 10th chapter when we end up the book of Mordecai, who is extolled by the Jews for all the things that he did. Hope you'll join us in chapter 10, the next video seminar. Until then, God bless.